Can do this. Hi, Mike Pung here, and I'm glad you're with me. I want to share some more stories of my family, things that were related to me. Um, and I would like to do this because this is a good time of the year to tell stories. It's a time of the year when, even though Halloween and the Day of the Dead is past, it doesn't matter. It's still the time of the year when the veil is thin between realms, different realms that some people acknowledge, some people don't. It doesn't matter. I do, and that's all that I need to matter for me. And it was a time of the year that the Celts used to enjoy telling stories, and they would tell stories. They knew it was a time to slow down. The harvest was coming to an end. Preparations had been made for the colder months, and they would get together and they would tell these stories because it taught them about their heritage, and it showed that they valued their ancestors. And I value mine, and I want my children and grandchildren to know some of these stories too. I want them to have them. And so I'm making these videos, and I hope that others of you are just along for the fun and for the whatever might communicate to you. Be open. I would ask you to do that and listen and enjoy this. Um, Sometimes they can be a little scary. Sometimes they're just the weird supernatural type things that have happened that usually happen with many families. So I'm going to ask you to listen now as I tell the story about my Uncle Frankie. Uh, my grandmother and grandfather hadn't been married for very long when for just 4 or 5 years when they had their first child. Uncle Frankie, who was about 3 years old when this happened, uh, and my grandmother had been alone for a couple of weeks because my grandfather was a circuit riding preacher, and he would go to different areas down in southeastern Missouri and northeastern Tennessee, or northwestern Tennessee and northeastern Arkansas, and he would just go and help people out. He would preach the Bible to them. He would preach the gospel and share things with them that might help them, and just kind of be a pastor to them in the couple of weeks he'd be going from place to place. And he came home one night, and one late afternoon, and it had been raining, and he put the horse in the barn, and my grandmother and little Frankie didn't know that he was home yet, and he knew that they didn't because they hadn't opened the door. So after he took care of the horse and put it in the barn, he was walking up the path to the house, and he started singing Amazing Grace. And as he did, my grandmother and Frankie heard him. They threw open the door. My grandmother threw open the door, and Frankie ran out. And my grandfather scooped him up and put him on his shoulders and kept singing. And they just had a fun little reunion. My grandmother had finished making supper, and they were just kind of cleaning up when there was a knock at the door. By now, it was dark, and it was a group of neighbors, of fellow farmers there. And they said, Walter, we're going out. We've been having a problem while you've been away. There's been a big cat that's been attacking, like a mountain lion type thing, a puma, that had been attacking uh, our livestock. We've lost some chickens and some small cattle, and we really want to get this thing. And they said, we thought you might want to come. And he said, well, I'm just finishing up here. But yeah, I'll be there. You go ahead and I'll catch up. He went back inside and he told my grandmother what was going on. And she said, yeah, I've heard they've been talking about it. He said, well, I'm going to go. And little Frankie just wanted to go. He didn't want his dad to leave again. So my grandfather said, you know what? It's not raining anymore. I'll take Frankie. Don't worry, I'll take care of him. And he said, I'll just let him sit on my shoulders as we go, because most of them were not going to even have guns. They were just going to be with lanterns and trying to flush the thing out towards the people who had guns. And that was the way they had planned it. And so my grandfather went out and he picked Frankie up and put him on his shoulders. And just as he did, my grandmother heard these three screams, and it sounded like to her a woman and a woman screaming. And she said, "What is that?" And my grandfather said, "Well, I didn't hear anything." And she said, "It sounded like that cat you guys are going after, you men are going after." And he said, I didn't hear anything. He said, "Don't worry, Rosa, we'll be back soon enough." And so they left. While they were out, they were under a group of trees, and they heard screams like my grandmother had heard, but no, my grandfather hadn't heard it back at the house. And they knew it was the cat they were after. Well, they kept shining their lanterns up into the tree. They couldn't see anything. And not only that, they looked all around the trees. It was easy to see tracks because it had been raining earlier, and they could find absolutely no tracks. And they never did that night find this cat. But it did start raining on the way back home. And my grandfather got back, and they were pretty wet, and my grandmother dried them off. And he said, "We heard that cat, and we heard a scream like you described, but we didn't see anything." And my grandmother said, "I think it's an omen. I think it's a sign. I don't like this." Well, it turns out it was, because my well, Uncle Frankie, who was just a little boy then, 3 days later, he came down with pneumonia. He got a cold and came down with pneumonia. And within 3 weeks, he was dead. Um, so, signs, if we're open to them, I think we can perceive things. Um, Sometimes they don't happen because we want them to, but we just have to be aware that those signs are around us. Telling stories, well, that's pretty awesome because it helps us to remember our family. And I hope that you will be inspired maybe to gather some of these stories for yourselves, make a video, write them down, do something and tell them and pass them on, because they can be important. And it's really important to remember too, sometimes when there are a lot of people who perceive things, who might think that they have some kind of moment, but they get talked out of it by their ego. They get talked out of it by other people who primarily are motivated by ego. You got to have a logical explanation. Well, maybe the logic just hasn't caught up with what is there deep inside of us, which we each have our own heart. Ego and heart are the operating systems we come equipped with. Learn to listen to these kinds of things with heart. And heart knows the times when we need the explanations and when the science applies, but some things just can't be explained that easily. But we can, and this is what I would like to emphasize, we can trust our heart. We can trust that we can perceive the spirits around us who really want to help us. And this is the story of my Uncle Frankie, who died when he was 3 years old. He was somebody that his little sister, my mom, never got to meet. And I want to just tell you one more extension of this. About 2 weeks ago, as I was on my morning walk with my puppy, recalling, remembering. I always address and give thanks. I call it my greeting, my gratitude greeting. As I walk, I talk to the spirits that I know, to the nature spirits about me within the trees and in plants and the elements. And there's just a lot. It's there. And so I acknowledge it. And I acknowledge my family too. And I do this twice a day. I do it in my ceremony at night too. And as I was going along the other day, it was just like there was this focus. It was like Uncle Frankie. I sometimes don't remember as much about him because I never knew him. Uh, but all of a sudden, as we're walking along, and this is how sometimes you might be able to tell, is this something that I'm making up, like I'm sitting down to write a short story, or is it just something that pops into your consciousness and it wasn't created by you? All of a sudden, there was this little presence there. I won't say it was like I could kind of picture a body, but maybe not of a little boy, but there was this presence there, smiling and waving at me. And it was right when I had mentioned Uncle Frankie and I had said, I don't know as much about you. And boom, right there, right then was Uncle, my little Uncle Frankie, his spirit, his essence, his energy that was there. And he let me know, yes, I know that you're remembering me. Let your ancestors know that you remember them. Listen to your heart. And the more you hear your heart, the more awakened you will be to how truly amazing you are, how amazing we all are. When we know ourselves, we can know and value other people so much greater, and we can value our ancestors too. So for now, this is all I'm going to share with you. I think this week there'll probably be some more stories coming because I would like you to know about them. And I would like them to maybe be an opening for your own heart to relate to just begin this recognition of who you are and how great you are and how great your ancestry is. Until next time, love and peace.